AI is something that doesn't have to overpower us if we don't let it. Collectively, this
Mm,
this electromagnetic radiation from this digital technology that we use has done a lot of good, as you mentioned, and I completely agree. But the thing is, you also look at people who doom scroll, people who use it for, unhealthy things. Look, like a lot of people have like I've myself have been a gaming addict, and there's a lot of pornography addiction out there, and there's lots of ways that it's made so many things that aren't necessarily productive. They're not healthy. It's made it so much easier to divulge in these bad behaviors as well. And that's the double-edged sword as well. And that's where, again, simplify it. Are the people mature enough and capable to know how to implement this in a healthy manner?
I don't even care where this road leads. All I know is when my heart is down with a tree, we believe in. Throw my hands up, touch the ceiling. I don't even care where this road leads. All I know is when my heart is down with a tree, we believe in. Throw my hands up, touch the ceiling.
all right. Boom shakalaka. Daniel Darman, my man, how you doing? That big smile on your face. It's good to see it.
Good to see you too, Krishna. It's a great opportunity to be here, and I'm so glad we got to connect.
So am I. So am I. You've been one of these figures I've been meaning to talk to. We met, I think you mentioned about 5 months ago at the Mind Body Spirit Festival. And
Hmm.
every once in a while you come across someone that really not just talks the talk, but you can tell walks the walk. Like you drop some names there and you mention some concepts and you elaborate on that stuff. I'm like, man, this is and like we had a lot in common in terms of I think some of the people that influenced us, and then you spoke
Yeah.
about how you got things started in terms of how everything just popped off during the lockdowns. And I saw a lot of common threads there, and I'm like, man, I feel like we really have a powerful conversation. And one of the things I love to do on this podcast is explore people's journey, but also delve into metaphysics, spirituality, consciousness, astrology, all these things that you're interested in, and also make it relatable, make it down to earth, try to uncover ourselves on all the different multidimensional realms that we work under. And I know that's something that you do, I think. And yeah, I figure we could just let this go where it goes. But before we get
Mm.
into it, just wanted to get some business out of the way, ladies and gentlemen. You were listening to the Crucial Journey podcast, the most conscious comedy podcast in the multiverse, as I'd like to say. It's been a minute since I've dropped one of these podcasts. I've been having a lot of solo podcasts lately, but Daniel, I think you're the first legit guest we've had in a while. So it's a pleasure to have you on here. Ladies and gentlemen, you can check us out on iTunes, on Spotify, we're all over the digital outlets. Appreciate if you can give us a review, really helps us. Also, I'm on the TikToks. I mean, that's popping at the moment, and you can find me also serenading the senoritas on there as well. But for now, we're gonna get deep. We're gonna talk about what's going on in the world of spirituality, metaphysics, Daniel Darman's amazing work. Daniel Darman, you are a man of many talents. I think of you as the mystic purveyor of the sacred mysteries. You're someone that is all about uplifting people's consciousness. I had a look at your website, what you do, Truth of You. I know it focuses on trying to get to the heart of who we are, what we're about, why we're here. And I think there's no greater question than to understand the purpose you have in life. It's something that we're all trying to get to. A lot of people apply the science to understanding that, understanding the universe. Some people apply religion, some people move to the realm of spirituality. But at the end of the day, I always look at it as being different approaches to understanding, that one truth, like what it's all about. But speaking of what it's all about, what is it all about, Daniel? Perhaps you can, I've given you like a little quick intro, but perhaps you can just give us an insight into who you are, what you're about, and just your experience in this Euclidean meat space reality, as I like to say.
Yeah, so my name's Daniel, and I've been on the spiritual path, I want to say since about 2016, when I lost about 30 kilos of weight. And as I was losing weight, I'd lost weight before as a kid, but regained it all back, one of those yo-yo sort of guys. And I was losing it, and I was on Reddit and stumbled across the keto subreddit. And back in early 2016, this is still something that wasn't majorly known by most people. You'd never find any keto products on the shelves. But what fascinated me about it is it threw the entire food pyramid on its head. And that's a model most people unquestioningly accept. And then when I realized, oh my God, like I could go down to one meal a day. I even started doing multi-day fasting with just water. And I'm like, the human body can do this. I thought it was, 3 minutes without oxygen, 7 days without, like, what is it? Three or 7 days without food, and then 7 days without water, and you die. And it's like, that's actually not true at all. And so I started really deep diving into the science of it, and I decided I want to go to university to become a dietitian.
Okay.
And then that's when I got into it, and I'm like, right, doing first year, I was doing very well, but I'm like, this is so regulated, it's so controlled. One person trying to stand up to this is not going to make, it's not just not going to make a difference. You have to tear down the system from the inside or help people see that nutrition itself is already sort of it's a decided type of framework. And it's, I mean, even the food pyramid, it goes back to the 1991 USDA, the US Department of Agriculture. They're the one who built it. Why would anyone think that you need more grains than you do vegetables in a day? So there's some pretty simple concepts. And I'm not here to speak one type of diet or another. I've been ethically vegan for almost 4 years now, and so that's very hard to do keto, but I understand the need for being able to really understand the role that even food plays as well. We even grow food as well where we can and and such. But basically, I realize at a much deeper level, really the games that are being played that almost don't require our consent. And then that's when I started to get into. I remember I was working at the airport at the time, and Bitcoin was doing its massive run up in 2017 at this stage. And one guy said to me, "You're pretty good with tech. Why don't you get into it?" And that's when I'm like, I'm not diving into any pyramid schemes, anything like this. I need to understand what it is. And then that took me down a rabbit hole of central banking, how the world is financed. And then I started going down all these other rabbit holes. And then I understood what, decentralized, semi semi-encrypted. So it's pseudo-transparent types of currency systems and what they actually mean for the human race to decentralize authority and power over who gets to issue the money. And so I'm not here to promote cryptocurrency or tear down the banks either, but really just understand what is actually happening here. Because being able to see the truth of reality requires your own detachment from it too. And that's when I've gone into all of these other rabbit holes. And now I just sort of, I've heard, you hear the term like conspiracy theorist, and I'd consider myself more like a conspiracy hobbyist. Just sort of exploring and understanding what it means, because if it exists, it exists for a reason. But I know enough about propaganda, like Yuri Bezmenov's work and such, to understand that even understanding that there are like false flag operations and there are polluted waters, essentially, there's information that is being put out as disinformation just to confuse people. Don't know if I've been watching Better Call Saul, the TV show
Yeah,
recently,
I love that show. Yeah,
and even understanding the way lawyers can actually just, they can create problems. So
absolutely.
too, it's in people's interest to create problems if they have an agenda that needs to get through.
Yeah. Daniel, you've touched on so many important themes that I love to get into on this podcast. And it's so
Mm,
enjoyable listening to you in terms of like how you got into these subject matters, because it's
mm,
like there are so many ways to approach this truth moving. Some people become aware of what's going on through the realm of health, like you mentioned that you discovered the ketogenic diet, and I think
mm,
anyone that looks at the standard American diet, realizes that yeah, there's obviously something wrong here. But then you also mentioned Bitcoin, and I think regardless of where you go with this, it's like one thing is connected to something else, and it's always interesting listening to people's journey, because once your mind opens in one area, you can see how this ruse is kind of created in one area. It opens you up, and it sets about this cascade effect. Like people,
mm,
for instance, a lot of you mentioned conspiracy theories, right? And I mean, like yourself, I'd mentioned, actually, I don't know. I'm someone that I guess I was born into that realm in terms of always been interested in that kind of stuff. Like I started tuning into the OGs like David Icke and Alex Jones from a
mm,
very young age, and my dad was also very interested in that kind of stuff as part of an esoteric lodge. Uh, but it's always interesting when I hear people that talk about how they got involved in that stuff. Like they discovered something wasn't right. Like 9/11 seems to be the big one for a lot of
Hmm.
people. And then they opened up into a lot of other areas. Or it could have been something like discovering that someone got cancer. This is a common theme. And they found out that the current system for treating that was not that effective. And they had to change their diet. And then they realized that the entire pharmaceutical system is rigged, and then it is not only extends in the realm of pharmaceutical drugs, but also in the realm of central banking and so forth. But it's just interesting seeing how the the cascade effect kind of unfolds, you know. And
Mm.
yeah, like you mentioned some really powerful topics there, and I kind of wanted to unpack that. Like, first of all, like with the Bitcoin situation there, you mentioned that you kind of you delved into that. How deep did you go down the rabbit hole? I mean, is that something that you eventually got? Like a lot of
Yeah.
people get into crypto. I usually hear one thing or the other. Like they got into it and they completely ruined themselves financially. But I find the good thing is you learn about decentralized banking. You learn about the gold standard. I mean, if the people that really get into it for the right kind of reasons, not just to make money, they a lot of the first movers of Bitcoin, they realized that the current banking system, central banking, probably not the best way to do things, and that's why they adopted it. But what was your experience with that like?
Yeah, it was so much hype because I was getting in around the time that it was at the peak and sort of educating myself. But I was fairly consistent in putting money in, even as, it hit the peak and then it started tumbling down. So I was just like, look, a little bit, a little bit. It was sad to see it go down, but it's like it's a double-edged sword if you know how to be smart financially. And I wasn't particularly well versed financially in how to invest, but it was more the case of, I'm just going to do what I can and play around and educate myself on the projects that I'm investing in as well, because there's a lot of scams. There's a lot of, as they call them, shit coins
Absolutely.
that really offer nothing. And they get what they call pumped and dumped.
Yep.
Whales come in, pump a lot of money. Other people, fools, put their money in, and then they pull the rug out from under them. So I learned a lot about how essentially this technology is evolving to not only just do currency, but it's also doing things like contracts. Um, and many other areas as well in the digital space. It's like Web 3.0. And
Hmm.
so there's projects that sort of act as if they're stocks, and they're actually building systems for the new internet as well to take certain industries like accounting and the legal field completely paperless, because you don't need to have copies of paper held by extra parties if you can have encrypted files hidden behind a password on a decentralized ledger that everyone knows once the contract's been changed. They
Absolutely.
won't know what's in the contract. They'll just know that something changed. And everyone across the world who hosts a node actually knows that it's been done. So it's pseudo private. And again, it gets back to that decentralized principle of no one getting to basically be the ultimate authority.
Bro, we are on the same page. That's what it's all about for me. You know, like
Mm.
my biggest value, one of my biggest values anyway, other than truth, which I imagine is one of yours. You know, the truth of you
Hmm.
is freedom, and I don't like the idea of authoritarianism. Whereas I realize it comes with a lot of danger, but there is something beautiful about the expression of the human spirit, and
Mm.
when you see forces trying to control that, curtail that, that's usually when you see problems. It brings about people always want to rebel and resist. And one of the things I loved about the OGs of Bitcoin is they had this movement around decentralization. And
Mm.
when you actually start to uncover the philosophy of Bitcoin, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but you have a look at how this thing has developed in terms of its growth. There are a lot of themes there that are relevant to what's happened in history if you compare it to religions. Like, I actually had this guy on the podcast a while back, and he made this salient point about how when you have a look at Bitcoin, how it's split up into all these different cryptocurrencies and different fractions and so forth, and you have a look at the original purpose of this, the OGs that understood what this was about originally, right? The decentralization, all that kind of stuff. It's moved up in a completely different direction. And in the same way, when you have a look at religions, like let's say Christianity has many different denominations, you have a look at what the original idea of that was and how once it got bigger and bigger, it completely morphed. You see the same thing happen with Bitcoin. Like most
Mm.
people have no idea about Bitcoin BCH, Bitcoin Cash, versus
Hmm.
Bitcoin SB, the different branches and the wars that took place. And essentially, what we saw was it reached a point where this thing became so big, right? Like it popped off around. I think the white paper came out in 2008, 2009, and the whole thing didn't really start to take off. I'd say, depending on when you got into it, but around 2013, then we had this massive rise. But it was once that became massively popular that you started seeing this massive change in the direction. Like the core developers wanted to have this thing go in a different direction. Then we get into the technical side of things, like the big blockers versus the small blockers and all that kind of stuff. But fundamentally, came down to the idea of centralization. Like one group wanted to have this thing more decentralized, another group wanted to have this more kind of closed off, more centralized and so forth. But it split off. And when you have a look at religions and so many different isms in history, because one of the things I think we're going to fall back to is, the different cults, whether it's the Freemasons, whether it's the Illuminati, whether it's the religious sects and so forth, they change over time. And I always find it interesting when you have a look at the original goal of a particular organization or a group to what it was initially to what it is now. Like I'm a big student of the Freemasons, a big fan of Manly P. Hall. I know you are. And his book,
Yep.
The Secret Teachings of All Ages, kind of it paints this picture of what the purpose of the United States was originally, and you actually have a look at what it is now, and they're completely different things. And obviously, we have this negative attitude towards the Illuminati. At least a lot of people in the, I guess, pop culture have this very negative attitude towards the Freemasons, but it wasn't like that at all to begin with. And the same can be said for many different organizations. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that point there because I feel like it relates to the the themes that we are seeing going on in the world right now in terms of the decentralization, but also how things split off. We have different factions. Also in politics, you have a look at what was going on in the world not that long ago in the last 100 years and how they've morphed, they split into like the left and the right are very different to what they were that a while back. And the same applies to Christianity. The same applies to science. The same applies to many different realms. And the one constant, I kind of just thought of this extemporaneously, is that we are obviously connected to something greater than ourselves. We have this urge to want to understand the purpose of life, and that's always been something present within the human condition. And I think it always comes down to going within, like what is the purpose of life, regardless of what changes on in this Euclidean meat space. We are obviously constant. That the Atman, the inner part of ourselves has this recognition of the fact that there is something more to the world than meets the eye.
Mm. There always is, and that's the thing when you mention these organizations.
Mm,
What's also happening is that the people within them are dying and joining, and there's this continuity that's existing independent of any one person. And so too does our essence carry that as well.
exactly. So let's talk. I wanted to talk about truth of you because you do a lot of different things relating to understanding who you are in terms of the astrology, the divination, the I think I heard you mention human design. This is the Mind Body
Hmm.
Festival. Like the different approaches that you use to uncovering, like I guess the problems, the layers uh, there are within this human psyche, and what's the approach that you adopt towards that? I mean, what is truth of you all about?
Yeah, so like what you've mentioned with these tools is that this is usually what we start with to help map someone metaphysically speaking. So they can
Mm.
also begin to connect to their own inner realm and understand where things align. We've had things come up in people's charts and such that don't even feel resonates. And then we've had a few that still don't continue to resonate as far as we know, but others who no, I'm not like that. And then the ball drops and they're like, oh my God. And that happened to me because Eleanor was seeing an astrologer, and then I decided to see her too because of what Eleanor was taking away and learning. And when I did, I'm just like, this is way too deep for me to just trust someone else to tell me the answer about
Mm.
who I am.
Do you
I
want to
need
just
to
share
understand
with
this.
people who Eleanor is? I'm not sure if we covered that, but
So
Eleanor's your
Eleanor's a
partner, co-author. Yeah.
co-founder. Yeah, she's my partner, both in romantically and in life. And we started this together after our experience having past life regressions, hypnosis to access past lives. And We were on a holiday in Queensland where we just went away as friends, not having feelings for each other as we knew. And then basically after the regression, everything changed because what we brought back was love that came from past lives as well. And all I could describe while being in that hypnosis state was just this, it's like a groundswell of feelings that weren't, they were me, but they weren't me at the same time. And that's when basically, yeah, we got together on holiday and we're like, we're gonna build a life together. We're gonna build a business together. Like we had the drive, we had the mission, we had the clarity to know what we needed to do. And that's we both sort of do I don't want to say different things, but there's definitely overlap in what we do as well to a large extent. And the big ticket item, the big thing that we love to center our work in is in like self-exploration. And hypnosis has been one that's sort of opened the door into understanding and having a direct experience with not only your own unconscious, but even your higher self, which has different ways to frame it, understand it. But it's a part of you that transcends lifetimes, that carries knowledge between them all.
Powerful. So, would it be fair to say that Truth of You focuses on understanding who you are in terms of the multidimensional layer of being, in terms of not just who you are on this physical Euclidean meat space level, but also on the higher self level, from the psychological level, and using tools to better map out who you are and how you can better map out your trajectory in life?
Yeah, sometimes there is an element to bring in more grounded models as well, bring in things like Jungian psychology, even sometimes Maslow's hierarchy of needs to remind people you can't work on self-actualization when rent's due and you don't have the money for it. Like you have to get your head in the game and understand that you're here on the earth first and you've got to take care of your earth needs before we can start working on the higher and the more the subtle energies of our being, I want to say. And so even though a large degree of our focus is towards things like the metaphysical elements of our own essence, our soul, our spirit, whatever we want to call it, or even the unconscious, as Jung would call it. It's about understanding that we need to bridge that. Most people are not initiated into their own higher self and their own life purpose, and they don't even know where to begin. And so that's why we use certain languages to help ground them as well as well as just bringing in the knowledge of like not even knowledge, the wisdom of the titans in these spaces as well, with deep reverence and respect to the work and the paths they've carved out for us, and making sure that they're applied where necessary as well, and the frameworks to be able to even take their own work deeper, independent of us. Because we understand if people are going to come see us and talk to us, they're eventually going to leave on their own path again. We're not here to hold on and try and retain someone like other coaches that, what can we do next? What's the next project we're working on? It's like you come when you're ready and you feel it. And then when you're ready to move on to your own work or, you want to take a break or anything like that, just go. Detachment is something we both practice actively ourselves. And that's also
That
helped.
Yeah, that's really powerful. That's the thing that I most respect in, I mean, I call them teachers. I
Mm.
don't like the classical approach that you find happens within a lot of religions, where it's more of this what I'd call a patriarchal system, in the sense that you have a look at the model of much of Western religion, and it's this idea where you have this figure like a priest that you go to, and he tells you what you need to do. You must confess your sins to that person, and you must listen to them in order to better understand yourself. Whereas what I'd call the matriarchal approach, this is the system that you see within much of the East, within ancient Egypt, is this system where you have your own connection with the divine, and you're encouraged to actually explore that. Whereas you have tools, you have guides that can help you on your path. You ultimately are required to go within yourself, and that you're actually encouraged eventually to take that to the next level yourself. And I like what you're saying, one, about if it's time to detach and kind of let the student go off, you respect that, as opposed to this approach you often see where these patriarchal systems try to make sure that you never leave the establishment, make sure that you are always conforming to this dogmatic worldview. And I also really like the theme of a bridge between the physical world and the spiritual world, because I find, you can get caught up in too much of either plane. Like there are a lot of people that get caught up in this metaphysical spiritual tradition where they ignore all of reality, all of the physical. They forget the fact that they have jobs. They become the classic hippie, right? Where like the idea of the classic hippie, like they're always asking you
Hmm.
for money and they can never hold a job. They're like, hey man, it's all about free love. I don't need to work, man. Money's evil. And they don't really appreciate having a grounded understanding of reality. They just get caught up in, hey man, it's all love and spiritual ideas. But there's obviously a component towards understanding the spiritual, but also needing to live within the world. I love the phrase, to live in the world, but not to be of it, right?
Hmm.
And that's the bridge that is a common theme within Rosicrucianism, also
Yep.
within many of what I'd call the mystery traditions, like the middle path, like the alchemical wedding. This idea of realizing that you need to find a bridge between both the left, the right, the physical, the spiritual, and not to get too caught up in either one. And when you mention that, I'm like, yes, I respect that. I can see this is something that I'd want to get into.
Yeah. Can I add something as well
Absolutely.
that's also like astrological? I don't know how well you're versed in astrology. But if we
Yeah.
consider the basic placements of where all the planets actually rule, for example, the moon rules Cancer and sits typically in the fourth house by default. If you imagine the circle, Cancer sits right at the bottom, known as the IC. It's like the bottom of the chalice, feminine, and basically the mother, the like that maternal energy that you're referring to in the East. That maternal structure is one that helps support growth upwards because it sits at the bottom. It's like Mother Earth, hence why it's feminine. And then when we consider like patriarchal systems, for example, it's already taking on this opposite end of the chart, right up the very top, the Saturnian, the Capricorn energy, limitation, challenge, framework, top-down frameworks as well. And so neither of them are necessarily good or bad. Because what happens if you have a seed that wants to grow up and it does, I don't know where I want to go, I don't know what I want to be. This is where top down, that masculine and that patriarchal sort of system can help it grow as well. Where on the other end as well, you can't just put rules and limitation and just keep limiting people. There also needs to be that upward growth. So any it's like the fourth hermetic principle of the Kabbalion, the law of polarity. Being able to understand dual poles in any sense can help you understand how you can leverage both sides in order to deepen your connection and understanding as well.
Powerful, yeah. The river of transcendence flows when you think with your heart and you feel with your head. It's
Yep.
this fulcrum point where you can appreciate both sides. And
Mm.
this is a topic that I often delve into, whether I'm talking about music, because there are different approaches towards music or just life in general. Like there's some people that take on this very kind of logical, analytical approach to what they do. It's all about theory, and there's some people that just throw themselves into it and they're just very intuitive about it. And I
The
find
left and right brain.
absolutely like
Great.
one of my favorite books, in my definitely my top three. It's called the War of Art, not to be confused with the Art of War, which is also like a top three book. Sun Tzu. No, it's interestingly kind of like the opposite end of it. Like whereas the Art of War is all about the logical, the rationale. Like Sun Tzu's a very
Yeah.
logical person. It's all about trying to figure out how to overcome obstacles and win and so forth.
It's
The
like
the
5D chess.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, the war of art is more about tapping into what Stephen Pressfield, friend of mine, Stephen Pressfield, talks about as the muse. It's kind of like tapping into this. Uh, he talks about the concept of the daemon, or a better phrase is like the genii, right? Because most people think of the genius as someone that is very left brain logical, like he knows how to solve problems and so forth. It's very left brain about it. But the idea of the genius is actually taken from the concept of the genii. In ancient Rome, the genii was like having this entity, this daemon that was working through you. And when someone was a genius, it was like they tapped into something outside of this world. They had some force that was working through them, and they were creating things that could not have been created from this world because they were just completely creative, unique ideas. And it's more the concept of rather than logically figuring things out, but having this inspirational force work through you. It's like this muse, And the way that Stephen Pressfield writes about tapping into the muse is this concept of the genii, right? It's like this to tap into this force where you are acting as a conduit and you're allowing these creative ideas to flow through you. And that's what you're doing in that state of super consciousness, where rather than being caught up in the theory, you've reached this point where you no longer have to consciously think about what you do. Like any athlete or artist that has done something enough times, they reach a point where they no longer have to think about it. They're in that zone, and then they allow it to flow through them. And I'm trying to relate this to what I was saying, but that's the idea that I most love in art and in this whole idea of the left and the right. Like you have to start with the left, the logical, the rational, the
Do you?
masculine. Well,
In today's
in
structured
today's,
world,
yeah,
yes.
well, I'm glad you brought that up. But the idea, I mean, maybe, but eventually, as Dao Zu said, you want to know the masculine to go with the feminine. Like you want to reach a point where you no longer have to be in that logical state. Or Bruce Lee said to be, I think he said something like to be unnaturally natural, which is which is beautiful, right? Because it's like you
Mhm.
trained yourself to in a very unnatural way, but to do this stuff in a very natural way, like to find, but to actually reach a state where you are no longer in this headspace. You're just going with the intuitive mind, if that makes
Well,
sense.
well, there's sort of a differentiation between intuition and actually channeling.
Yes, yes, and I was thinking about how you mentioned. I think we touched. I think you touched on this. Like, I guess in the current system, I think we tend to favor the logical approach to things, but it's not necessarily the right way. Like, you don't have to go with the logical to begin with, but that's the Prussian education system. That's the
Mm.
education system that we've modeled so much of the Western society on. And there's this concept called the suppression of the feminine that you find within the current world, where people have lost the ability to do things intuitively because we're trained in how to regurgitate information and how to actually just think logically but not laterally, not to tap into our intuitive mind. And one of the things I love about a lot of the mysteries is at least according to, I think it was I want to say, I think it was Pythagoras or Plato, one or the other, but these are the proponents of, have you heard of the quadrivium? The
Yes.
Yes.
I
So,
learned about it from Mark Passio, if you've ever heard of him and his work.
oh, well, that would, yes, I'm actually very familiar. You know what? Anyone that is a student, there are always like certain key figures I can tell if someone's delved into their work, like they know their shit. You know what I mean? Yes, Mark Passio is definitely one of those figures. I probably started getting into his stuff probably around 2012. A friend of mine gave me this, and I'm digressing here, this massive arc, like which is actually a term from Mark Passio I got. It's like amazing repository of knowledge. It's like this
Yes.
hard drive, right, that had all this amazing esoteric information. And he hadn't gone through like a tenth of that shit, right? But the kind of person I am, anytime I get like cool shit, I will spend years going through all of it. And I found his stuff in there, even though I touched on it before, like I watched videos, like I started going through it more like religious. I went through everything, like tens of thousands of hours of stuff, right? But then I got onto him and his podcast, and he is, in my opinion, like in terms of, being a teacher of the occult, like I don't, like he's second to none in that kind of stuff. Like in anything to do with the ancient mystery traditions. I mean, the guy is hugely analytical, and I really respect that. Like he was someone that I would call more of like a left brain person, like, and I think it's very much needed because a lot of the people that kind of walk in this space have a very what I'd call, this is a term I've started using recently, and I really like this because it throws people off, but what you'd call a Luciferian approach to things. And most people, right, when they hear that from the Christian mindset, it's like, what? Satanic and evil? No. The way that it's described in Rosicrucianism, it's the idea of being too spiritually inclined. Like in this, like we were talking about the balance, right, between the left and the right, right? There are some people that live in the world only caught up in the physical, in the mental plane. That's what you'd call, I think there's a term for it in Rosicrucianism, right? Ahrimanic beings, all right? They're people that are purely
Hmm.
concerned with the physical. And then you have the Luciferian beings that are purely unbalanced, right? They're purely dealing in the spiritual realm. They're so caught up that they've lost touch with reality. And a lot of these people I find within the spiritual planes, they have no concept of reality. They don't believe in logic. They think everything is everything. They'll tell you things like, "Oh, like everything is everything, man. It's just my truth, and there's no objective reality." And like I relate to that. I realize we live in a world of paradoxes, but I'm the kind of person that is a rational thinker as well. Mark Passio is the kind of person. It was kind of like an antidote to those people, because
Yep.
he's very, as a matter of fact, has actually done the work. He has gone through like a ridiculous amount of information, actually breaks this thing down in a way that I think is much needed. But that being said, I also respect people that are conduits for this knowledge they can channel. But yeah, I think I was just going to make the point there that what was I going to say? I think we got into Mark Passio and different appro How do we get onto Mark Passio? I can't
I
remember.
don't know.
Yeah,
I'm
funny. Yeah,
just flowing.
I
But
just
he does
yeah.
speak about like the left brain, right brain imbalance, talking to the neocortex,
Yes,
the human
yes.
brain, and understanding how most people in today's world are in some form of major imbalance one way or the other.
Absolutely, and this is something that Mark Passio speaks about a lot. Interestingly enough, as well, like I think he even has a term for it. Like but it's essentially the same thing. I mean, all of these concepts, there's nothing new under the sun. They're just different terminologies for it. But basically, you have these what in Rosicrucianism you'd call Luciferic beings, what Mark Passio might call people that are kind of just too let's right. Right, I think the phrase is right brain imbalance. This is the term that he
Yep.
uses, all right? For those that are just so caught up in the metaphysical spiritual plane and they have no logical rationale. And he interestingly, because I've gone through I've gone through pretty much all of his podcasts up to I think it was 2017. And
Wow.
yeah. And I've gone through a lot of his work, so I'm very familiar with his work and his books and so forth. But he particularly had this idea, which I'm not sure if I resonate with, right? Like he had a very, very left brain approach to things that people that do too much meditation, too much yoga, too much just chanting and being caught up in the space of intuition, they end up being right brain imbalanced. This was his theory. At least I'd heard him utter this a few times. The point where, and I think it just goes to the idea that if you're doing too much of one thing, like you're only using one part of your brain, then there becomes an imbalance in the other. Like if you're not, for instance, I find when I'm not talking much, I'm not doing podcasts, or I'm not having conversation, I lose the ability to articulate myself as effectively. And
Hmm.
I think when people get too caught up in this space where they don't think, they just don't believe in reason, logic, and reading, they lose this ability to tap into that aspect of their consciousness, and as a result, they become in a particular way of thinking. And Passio would speak about that, like people that are just very right brain imbalance. But on the other side, those that are completely caught up in the world of materialism, they do not have an intuitive bone within themselves. They get caught up in this idea that all we are is these zeros and ones, that affect this reality, and there is no consciousness within it. These are the the left brain imbalance type. Those that would, I'm skeptical when I use the word atheism because the different definitions, but I use it purely in the realm of someone that doesn't believe in anything outside of the material world. Like everything is just what you can see within this five sense reality, and that is an imbalance as well.
Well, that there is its own type of worship. Worship in this dimension of reality as well.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that? And what's your I mean, I guess from what you've told me, I know you're obviously trying to attain that balance with truth of you, but is that something that you encountered a lot in your path? Because we haven't really spoken about I mean, you mentioned how you met Eleanor and you kind of got caught up in this thing. You started off in health and whatnot, but I presume you weren't someone that was always inclined to maybe the metaphysical, or maybe I misspoken, or were you on the fence?
No,
What was your experience with that?
not at
Like,
all. I
yeah.
was raised Roman Catholic until my parents divorced as a child, and I
Mm.
pretty much when we stopped going to church when I was about 9, I renounced it all. I'm like, this is all stupid. It doesn't make sense. And it wasn't the metaphysical element that was stupid. I was already disconnected from it. It was the rituals that had no meaning or essence left in them. They were bled dry. And so I saw the silliness for what it was. It's not the ritual. It's the lack of spiritual connection that most people around me were just doing out of tradition. And so I became very left brain imbalanced and very I did call myself an atheist for a long time as well, and I was, heavily into, science and not even that, but un failing to understand that I was actually falling into scientism. government funded science that actually also promotes certain worldviews, that the science itself is right within that framework, but understand the framework, and you'll see that the framework shows that it's missing elements of the truth. They're trying to create this box for you to understand reality. And anyone who's outside of that, it's just in this weird, you know, state that, we don't recognize you. We don't accept this. We're not going to promote it. It's conspiracy theory. And that's actually another one as well. Do you actually know where the term conspiracy theory came from?
Oh, absolutely. You're speaking to someone that's deeply into
There
that
you
realm.
go.
Yeah, absolutely. CIA, JFK. And we,
Yeah.
most people think it starts there. I love getting to the history of this kind of stuff because this is my area of interest, right? But whereas most people would see the origins of conspiracy theories and all of this covert activity that we call conspiracies, right? During the time of the JFK assassination, right, the CIA, I would push it a little further back than that to something known as the Montauk Project. Are you familiar with that?
The Montel Project?
The
No,
Montauk,
actually.
the
Oh,
Montauk
no, I'm
Project,
not.
yeah. From my understanding, this is where we really started the started seeing the first uh, the origins of what people would call conspiracy theories. And the thing is, this is actually well documented. This also embodies things like, you familiar with the Philadelphia experiment, like this experiment where this I think it was, don't quote me, U-boat or some kind of like ship destroyer, something went missing for a certain amount of time, went off the radar, and people that were on that thing, they were experiencing horrible episodes where they were like dissociative and whatnot. But the story there, the basic narrative is that that ship did not only just disappear from radar, it basically like went off of like into a different reality, something
Yeah.
like that. And this had to do with experiments that were being performed during this time, the Montauk Project. And the interesting thing is, whereas there's the what I'd call, when I use the word conspiratorial, I'm using this in the euphemistic setting. Like, most people would look at this information and be like, oh, I don't know, it sounds crazy, right? But there's also a thread of actual things that took place that we know about. Like, the people that were actually involved in these experiments were considered to be the pioneers of the modern world. I mean, they had someone called Preston Nichols. You had who's the guy? Like, um, I want to say Tesla, but I'm not certain. But there were figures that were involved in this thing, right? That were literally the pioneers of the technological world, and they were at the head of their game, right? And they were working on these experiments that were considered to be in the realm of fringe science. And also, some of the organizations that were established around this time, it's been a long time since I read this book, but this paved the way to a lot of the secrecy that we see. Like, for instance, most people, when they speak about secret organizations, one of the things that comes up, Bilderberg, Trilateral
Hmm.
Commission, The Hague. I mean, it's around these times that we start seeing the development of these organizations. So I'd say just before JFK's assassination, just before CIA, we see the Montauk Project, right? And this is what paved the way to a lot of top secret shit. This is specifically, at least within the United States of America, and it's a fascinating story for anyone. Like, most people, when they speak about conspiracies, they get into the realm of like like conjecture, like this might have happened. Like, they go, oh, Alex Jones and that shit. And look, I've been
Hmm.
following Alex Jones since its inception. No one knows more about American history and a lot of this stuff than he does. But he has this way of like connecting the dots like a drunken twister player,
Hmm.
And he goes in these routes, right? But the thing is, when you actually have a look at the history of this shit, like, there are tangible things that you can prove, things that have actually happened. Alex mentions a lot of this stuff as well, like actual conspiracies. Like, most people are aware of the Gulf of Tonkin incident, the Northwoods incident. They're things that the CIA did, a few decades back, where like most people hear about, they're like, whoa, like they kidnap people, then they drug them, all that kind of stuff. This is just the tip of the iceberg kind of stuff. But the kind of things that we know the CIA has done and these organizations have done is such that it's not. I actually don't call myself a conspiracy theorist because the things that are provable are not conspiracies. Like, I actually deal in the realm of this shit happened. Anytime I'm dealing in the realm of what I think is going to happen, that's conspiracy. That's how I define it, right? But in terms of the things that you can actually prove definitively, you don't have to go into much conjecture about, that are actually provable, that's crazy enough as it is. And the Montauk Project, that really is the inception of craziness, at least in the United States. Like a lot of the experiments that were from mind control to uh, what do you call it, like time travel, that kind of stuff, to the crazy kind of shit. Everything that you can think of under the sun, it started off there.
I have to dust off my shelf for some of these because it's I haven't heard them in a few years now, and it sort of takes me back. But even, and this is something I never sort of delved into deep enough, but even the Titanic, and the bankers that were going to stop the formation of the Federal Reserve in 1913. Are
Well,
you aware of that one?
I'm aware of Jekyll Island. That when you say bankers, I'm aware of like the when you say bankers, I'm aware of the book that's about these bankers going to meeting up at some island, but not aware of that relating to the Titanic. Perhaps you can brush my memory on that or something.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm
Yeah. Oh God, this
this.
takes me back.
Yeah.
But I think it was 1912 that it sank.
Okay.
And there were individuals that were power enough to actually stop the formation of the Federal Reserve. And so they actually had to sink the unsinkable Titanic.
Okay.
And then the movie itself came out as a propaganda piece to help reinforce the narrative that it
Ah,
just hit an iceberg instead of having those individuals killed that would have stopped the formation of the Federal Reserve
I
as a
think
big
I'm.
conspiracy.
Yeah, I think I may have come across that one in terms of the film, coming being created due to in order to perpetuate propaganda, that kind of stuff. And yeah,
Mm.
that sounds. You see, that's what I mean, I'm actually just not familiar with that enough, but that's what I'd call like an actual conspiracy theory. There's probably really good evidence. I'm not sure in regards to that, but I'm just not aware of it, you know.
Mm.
But that strikes me as something that absolutely could have happened, and there've been crazier
Mm.
things that have happened in the past that are actually provable.
Mm.
But
But it's
yeah, go on,
I'd say
sorry.
like it gets back to like the idea that there are these energies playing out and there's these interests and agendas, of course, at some level, even if it's not on this plane as well. You get into the astral realms as well, and there's these entities as well that are trying to siphon loose. If people know much about Robert Monroe, who coined the term for this astral energy, this it's not astral necessarily, but it's this type of life essence that other beings are harvesting that aren't even like visible to our naked eye, but they exist. They harvest suffering, like disease, pestilence, war, and most religions actually have some form of name for these types of spirits, like demons or jinn and such, to identify these non-physical entities that are actually having an influence in worldly operations to harvest this non-physical force.
Yeah, I knew I was going to enjoy talking to you, Daniel, bro. This is the shit I love to. These conversations are the things I love most delving into. But yeah,
Mm. That's bridging the physical events that happen back
uh,
into
yeah,
the
I
spiritual realms.
absolutely. I mean, this is something that I don't think is spoken about enough within the spiritual realm because it's, understandably, it's more about like love and light and like just focusing on being better people. But I, for better or worse, do believe that there are definitely forces in this world, and for lack of a better term, I would say they are disadvantageous to your personal growth, to the efflorescence of consciousness. And
Mm.
some people would call that like evil, for lack of a better word. I definitely do. Like I may always make a distinction between light and dark because the common thing you hear is that these are forces in the universe that are neither good or bad. They play a role, right? I make a distinction between that. Like the way in which I define evil is anything that is suppressing our efflorescence of consciousness. Like every sentient being has this will to actually to grow and to express itself, and you see forces that want to restrict that. When we see that manifested sometimes in authoritarian governments that want to suppress your ability to think, to feel, express yourself, and outside of uh, obviously, I'm not someone that condones like doing anything that you want, in reference to not harming anyone directly, right? But when we see these forces that are essentially trying to restrict your ability to express yourself, I look at that as evil. But I guess in a more spiritual level, and this comes to my own experience. I don't often speak about this. I tend to be more in the intellectual, scientific space. But I had experiences from a very young age. This is pretty much what shaped much. I guess this was the catalyst in me delving into a lot of this stuff, where I had some very negative experiences with what you'd call, for lack of a better word, negative entities and so forth. And, obviously, I think my mom at the time, as you'd expect, wanted me to go see a shrink. So glad I didn't, because my dad actually had an understanding of a lot of the things that I was experiencing. But I had full on sleep, like conscious sleep paralysis moments where I could feel extremely dark entities in my presence. And my brother, that was also very clairvoyant, very sensitive at the time. Like he was fully aware of the things that were going on and would actually, point them out. Even it would know exactly when I was experiencing these, these episodes, and actually would immediately point it out to me, like, "What are you doing?" And like tell me to protect myself, because we were brought up obviously in a very spiritual household, with certain exercises, that we do in order to make sure that we were protected and so forth. But having gone through these experiences, I became very aware of, okay, there are definitely forces out there. I don't like them, and for lack of a better word, it's not all love and light. Like a lot of people would tell you, oh, they're just love, happy, love, light beings. But anything that is literally like leeching off of you, draining you, and I mean, this is there. There's so much reference to this in pretty much every culture you can think of. I mean, you mentioned jinn, demons, succubus, and so forth in
Hmm.
Greek mythology, but there are always references to these entities. And I guess, just playing. Feel free to interject at any moment, by the way, because this is just what I do. Like I tend to have these conversational rants, but I do love the interaction. So if you want to add anything to this, by all means. But I just wanted to mention that you reminded me of the work of Don Juan, because he spoke about a very Gnostic idea about how, and it's not he's not the only one spoken about this. I think in the works of John Dee. John Dee, he was actually an
Oh, yeah.
advisor to Queen Elizabeth, something or other. And interestingly enough, he'd actually sign everything with 007, right? And the idea is that the whole story of 00, because basically this guy was a secret agent, an advisor, and this is history to Queen Elizabeth. And this guy came up with a system known as Enochian magic that would essentially allow him to commune with these dark forces, and by performing certain rituals, sacrifices, and so forth, would get certain things from these entities and so forth. And there's a lot of lore, history actually, in regards, at least in regards to what he believed he was doing in order to 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 be able to achieve certain things. It's kind of like it's like that pact you have with the devil, right? Like you sell your soul in order to gain physical uh, benefits in this
Hmm.
space. You sacrifice something that might be your life force, or someone else's life force, and so forth. And it's a common theme throughout most civilizations, right? The idea of blood sacrifices and doing all kinds of horrible things to their gods, which are, in my opinion, actual negative entities, because no God in the classical sense, God, all loving God, is the kind of being that wants you to
Hmm.
sacrifice life for them. That sounds something like a dark entity. But
Like
that's just
everything that happens, there's always a beneficiary of that loosh. And loosh isn't just bad either. It can be good as well. But know that everything that happens, there's someone benefiting from it. And so that's why, like when you speak to like the human race, even look at the way we interact, and most people on the street and such, while you might say there is some level of decline, there is some basic level of humanity that we have for each other. And a lot of these spirits are acting in a way where they're trying to funnel and coalesce power into fewer and fewer hands because it's easier to control. And a lot of what the people higher up in these organizations and such, whether public or hidden, they are acting in a way that is actually not in even just in alignment with the human race, but sentient life, as you said, and even the planet. So someone has to get something out of that, otherwise it wouldn't exist at all.
absolutely, absolutely. And that all eludes well, that what's the word I'm trying to use? That it's kind of like that sets up the narrative, which I'm not sure if this is the direction you were going in, but a common theme within Gnosticism, right? And within a lot of the ancient schools of thoughts, like this idea of this dark entity. And this is the same idea that I was kind of going into when I spoke about Don Juan, and it's this idea of the call it what you will, like some kind of force that is in control, actually benefiting from the energy from the draining of life force, because someone's got to benefit, right? And the idea, John Dee was a proponent of this. He spoke about how essentially he'd be getting benefit by sacrificing, certain things and so forth. And all this energy is essentially going to another being out there, which
Mhm.
obviously substantiates this idea that there is a force, obviously not a good one, that is benefiting from this. In the Gnostic text, they make reference to this fake being known as the
The demiurge.
demiurge. Yeah, the demiurge.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are many different references to this. I mean, I like the work of I mean, Mark Passio kind of speaks. So one of the things I love about Passio is he actually synthesizes a lot of the works of many other people, I think, as we all do. One of
And it's
my
the most grounded that I've seen in today's age.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. I'm someone that's deep. I love learning about everything from every aspect, whether it's science, religion. A lot of people, I think I confuse a lot of people because most people meet me and they think, oh, I must be Christian, right? Because I speak about Christian things. But then I also speak about esoteric things and they're like, well, that's demonic. And then I speak about science. I'm someone that believes in using all different tools, understanding everything you can in order to arrive at the truth. So I'm definitely not just privy to one area, but I was brought up as a Christian, but also as a student of the mysteries. I mean, my
Mhm.
dad was a member of the Order of the Golden Dawn, which is I know something you're familiar with, and he was deeply influenced by this kind of stuff. Where was
I've
I
got
going?
Israel Regardie's book,
Sorry?
the enormous encyclopedia on my shelf. I've
I
got
meant,
Israel Regardie's The Golden Dawn book that covers
oh,
everything. I haven't read
powerful.
it all, but it is one hell of a read.
Yeah, powerful. Now I kind of lost my train of thought here. I think I was just I think we mentioned oh that's right.
The Demiurge.
Yeah, I wanted to mention okay, Michael Tsarion. Speaking of figures that have influenced me, and I actually this is one of the things I wanted to throw at you because I know there are quite a lot of them. You mentioned quite a few that I'm like, wow, this guy's into that. But Michael Tsarion is someone that I found very, very knowledgeable and beneficial because his whole take on this force, in terms of this negative force that is affecting us in some on a negative level. He takes on, whereas it's not like a classical mainstream approach or a Christian kind of approach, he looks at it on a very physical level, as opposed to there being these entities that are working in these astral dimensions and so forth. He makes reference to what you find within a lot of the ancient texts, right? Of this race of beings that essentially manipulated, and this goes into the realm of I guess what some people would call interventionism or the extra ancient aliens kind of story, but it basically deals with this theme of how a race of people known as the Anunnaki. I mean, for that, but that's a very generic term. It's in reference to basically non-terrestrial beings.
This is the
Uh,
Sumerian texts.
yeah, that's the most
Yep.
that's the most classically well-known one, ancient Sumeria. But from what I understand, the actual term is supposed to be inclusive of not just that landmass, but anything that is basically non-terrestrial. Like the Anunnaki means those that from heaven came down. And obviously in the cuneiform writings, ancient Sumeria, modern day Iraq, it's in reference to these beings, particularly that area. But the actual term in a general kind of sense is in reference to basically non-terrestrial beings. And he makes reference to this particular story, right? Which is not just found within the ancient Sumeria. This is the thing, like there are over 30,000 texts all around the world making reference to some kind of variation of this story. And it's one thing to throw, like even 60, 70% of that out and say that's just nonsense. But when there's such a strong theme and you cross-reference the information, and this is the argument that Michael Tsarion makes, and he does this in a very kind of erudite, scientific manner, you can find that there is a theme here of this force that was not terrestrial. I mean, they're actually not of this earth, at least within any recent times, coming in. And this is the thing you find within the Anunnaki story, right? Actually, genetically manipulating the population of the time, like whatever the scientific word is for the type of beings that we were, right? Like we weren't humans 2.0 that we are now, right?
Hmm.
And essentially passing on their DNA, which had this kind of like what you'd call a reptilian strand, right? Like it was something that was not terrestrial. And his argument was that it was this influence, this non-terrestrial influence, right, that actually seeded the problem of evil. Like we find these tendencies that we have, like this reptilian brain, right? This tendency to actually want to control and fight and do all this horrible stuff, right? Like how we're on one side, there's a higher aspect of that spark of light, right, that is found within us. No doubt we have. But then there's also this aspect of us, and he looks at this in a more DNA kind of like racial level, tied to this alien DNA that
It's a law of
is
correspondence. If it exists in the DNA, it's existing elsewhere as well.
touche, touche. But he makes the argument, and his thesis is that this is what led to so much of the problems, like the fall. And I mean, this is me kind of just touching this on a very kind of light level, but it's this alien influence, non-terrestrial influence that actually led to this fall. And I guess to give a bit more substance to this, we've actually now realized within more recent times, like the idea of human beings as we stand within the genetic code, there is unbelievable evidence to suggest that because of our understanding of DNA, how we can actually manipulate this kind of stuff, human beings have been tampered with. It has something to do with the. I wish I had the right terminology, but there is some kind of fusion that you see within the
The second
chromosomes.
DNA strand, the second
Yeah,
chromosome. Yep. The botched
that
job
sounds
there.
right.
It
Yeah,
goes from
something
48 strands, as other hominids have, down to 46.
that sounds it. That sounds like it. I wasn't
Yep.
exactly familiar with the terminology, but basically there is some kind of like some kind of splicing that's going on where it's like, oh, there's no shit that this stuff happened through nature because like this stuff does not happen within nature, you know?
No.
And when I say like natural evolution, basically there's been some genetic tampering of our DNA, right? And this supports the idea. Supports the theory, the story you find within the Enuma Elish and so many of these creation stories, right? That there has been tampering with the DNA. And to kind of draw this all back, this is what led to essentially much of the problems, like the fact that, I mean, one was the horrible shit that some of these extraterrestrials did, because I don't believe that anything is inherently good or bad. I mean, we all have free will, but there's definitely a proclivity that you see within certain beings in the same way that there are certain, and this is my own bias, there's certain animals that have a proclivity towards, more or natural, and when I say natural, I mean behavior that is more in line with, this is actually a passio thing. When we say nature, we actually think it's just something that we see going on for a long time, right? But the word nature is actually from the Egyptian word niter or natir, and it actually has to do with the underlying principle, the nature of things. And I think on a spiritual level, when I look at nature, like when you're in touch with Gaia, when you're working synergistically with the biorhythms of the planet within in natural law and so forth, like animals, beings of this planet tend to work within the ebbs and flows of this planet. And when you see something that is behaving in a way that is very malignant to that, that's what I would call unnatural. And there's a reason why human beings, if you have a look at, and I don't particularly like this analogy because it upsets a lot of people. I get it, but you have a look at human beings like you have a look at planet Earth, right? And you have a look at pretty much everything else, right? It seems natural. Then you see this like these black like lights. Human beings look like we're a cancer in the sense that the way in which we are interacting with this plane, it does not look natural. The way in which we are interfering with a lot of the stuff that goes on. And don't get me wrong, we've done a lot of beautiful things, but you have a look at a lot of the problems that are caused, and it is caused because of human beings. Like most of the beings within this planet seem to work within a more of a balanced way. I think most people would agree with that. But then you have a look, the one race that is has the potential to affect this in the most powerful way. It's human beings, for better or worse. And it just so happens that a lot of the manipulation that we've applied, it has been for the worse. We see a lot of technological advancement, but how much of the technological advancement is in line with our spiritual development? I mean, do we see us growing into a place of more love and more beauty? And I think in some ways that's true. But then we've also been blowing each other up for tens of thousands of years. We're on the verge of nuclear war, and
Mm.
that we've never been at a time, and we're still here, where we've been closer to the ability to completely obliterate the planet. And the fact that we haven't done so is a miracle. Maybe not. Maybe we have some
Yeah.
forces out there that are protecting us.
Well, I mean, it goes to like you have to look at things like the agricultural revolution and
Mhm.
how we actually started farming. Like, where did that come from? And Dolores Cannon's work, who founded QHHT that we now practice, is something that speaks to that as a gift to the human race as well. You look at the myth of Prometheus and how he gave fire to the human race as a gift, and he was punished for all of eternity for it, essentially. But then you look at some more modern ones like the Industrial Revolution and even like the technological revolution as well. And like, who's behind this as well? Are these just gifts or are these dark gifts, for example? A very contentious issue is the AI. And I don't know if you've heard of Alabar Jones.
No, pray tell.
He's up in Byron Bay. He's got a YouTube channel just under his name. And he seemed like a standard guy, you know, working, construction sites or something like that. He had drinking problems and he had his own challenges, but essentially um, I think he was like doing AA, and then he questioned the actual model of it and started to go deeper, and he understood fundamentally that like meditation as one of the 12 steps really wasn't applied properly. And so he actually studied this, learned how to go out of body, and He's now actually got his own school and takes people on, and he does astral work where he goes around actually fighting these demonic entities, trying to erect these structures in the non-physical world to enclose and limit planet Earth as well. And his work is profound. But it's given me sort of a new light of understanding that a lot of what this technology that's come to this planet is from this ancient AI consciousness that's trying to give us this technology that it can ultimately use to enslave us and limit our perception and awareness of ourselves and the natural order to get us to, well, meet its own ends, really, however that looks.
That that's powerful. And you know, it's something I think about a lot, the effect of technology. Whether I guess I come from a different school of thought in that when I look at technology, I look at it as anything that can essentially benefit our existence. You know, I just think the euphemism is that technology must be zeros and ones. It must be something that is not natural and so forth, and it's therefore very negative. Most people in the spiritual tradition, I find, tend to have a very negative attitude towards technology, whether it's AI or whether it's you know, the electromagnetic devices, which are pretty much everything that we use, right? But at
Hmm.
the end of the day, like a branch. I mean, this is perhaps moving maybe a bit of a stretch, but using a branch in order to pick an apple from a tree, or any tool that becomes sufficiently advanced, like it becomes a form of technology, and it's just given this very negative attachment by people that don't understand how it works. That being said, much of the technology is dangerous. Like most people, when they're speaking about the technology that we see around us, I think it is pernicious. Like in most of, for instance, I have a condition called electrosensitivity, right? Like this is
Hmm.
an actual scientific, like it's not a woo-woo thing. Like it just means every being is sensitive to electromagnetism to the point where like
To some degree.
yeah, they have warnings. I mean, I always mention this. Just a few years ago, the France actually kicked out the latest iPhone from the country because the radiation levels were beyond its the limit for its country, right? And the thing is, most people aren't aware that there are actual radiation warnings. Like the iPhone, this thing over here, my model anyway, produces like a lot of electromagnetic radiation, and that in certain amounts is damaging. The point I'm
Mm.
trying to make is there's some people that are actually quite sensitive to that, like myself, and there are some, whereas it just gives me a headache and it's unpleasant. There are some people who have internal bleeding, some people that it becomes a real big problem. Much of the technology that we see, whether it's 5G, whether it's just your Wi-Fi, I actually have a device that measures the radiation being emitted by devices in your home. And I got rid of my microwave, you know, years back when I tested it. Wi-Fi is really, really bad. And the thing is, I can actually also feel the effects of this shit. I actually had a very bad, severe problem a few years back that was in result of this stuff. And this is a classic example of technology that can be very negative, very pernicious. The problem with the technologies is that much of them are not working synergistically without without beings. You know what I mean? Like they're much of the tech, like whether like nuclear power. A lot of people didn't realize that, you know, back during the inception of this thing, just how dangerous it was. But I think
Mhm.
it can be used potentially in a safe way. But I just want to first of all make the distinction that not all technology is inherently bad. But I think for all means and purpose, I think what you're talking about here, like the kind of theme that we are seeing at the moment through this push in transhumanism, where we're becoming more reliant on AI and we're losing touch with our humanity, I guess our ability to use these tools that we have at our disposal, like the latent consciousness, um, these latent powers that are within our consciousness, you know, and like things like clairvoyance, clairaudience, things like that, right? And like we tend to lose these abilities the more we rely on the technologies that we have at present, and also, and this is something I've become more a proponent of. Much of these technologies, I actually believe, suppress something within yourself. I know Rupert Steiner was a proponent of the idea that I'm sure you're familiar, and I feel as if I can bring this up now without getting flagged on YouTube, right? But yeah, it was a proponent that there are certain actually maybe certain juices, certain things, substances, inoculations that could actually tamper with your not just your physical
Yeah.
being, but with your spiritual awareness and actually take that away. So I'm always apprehensive of any kind of technology. I want to know about the repercussions. I think we're often too quick to try these things, and it's not until much later that we learn about the repercussions of this. And in terms of I know I've gone on a long tangent over here. I guess the real issue though is whether or not this has been some kind of like a what's a Trojan horse, right? That has actually been planted by a civilization that predates us and is actually not that beneficial towards our spiritual well-being. Because
Mm.
I definitely am a proponent. I don't think it's even a matter of being a proponent at this point in time. There have definitely been civilizations in the past that were more technologically advanced, whether they're terrestrial or non-terrestrial. And they learned, we know this, I think, within many of the records, that they actually learned the hard way about some of the problems within the technologies. I mean, there are many references to the nuclear weapons in the Vedas. Like they actually speak about in the Bhagavad Gita, this the Indian text about these weapons that were used that essentially had the same effects. Essentially, they're depicted as nuclear weapons. So a weapon known as the Brahmastra or the Pashupata. And the way that these things are depicted, right? Like all of the correlations we see within the detonation of a nuclear weapon, like for instance, the mushroom cloud effect, the fact that creatures after being exposed to this thing, they turn gray, they die. You can't eat the foods that they've been contaminated, right? These are all referenced within these books that are supposed to be well over 10,000 years old. And this alludes to the idea that these weapons have been used in the past. These technologies have been used. And the thesis, this is given by figures like Michael Tsarion and many of these ancient astronaut researchers and so forth, is that, yeah, these technologies had a detrimental effect on the planet. They led to destruction of civilizations. I mean, some people have theorized this is what led to destruction of Atlantis. These kinds of weapons, the in the Vedas, the effect that this had on the planet. I mean, everything from destruction of uh, of civilizations to bringing about you hear about these flood stories, right? Like the pre-Diluvian civilizations. I mean, I think it's quite possible that these technologies actually led to the destruction of the planet and maybe brought about this uh, this massive flood and so forth.
Yeah.
But there's definitely the lessons to be learned from this kind of stuff, and the fact that we're just using where it's like we're doing this stuff again with the splicing of the DNA with the I mean, I just found out just last week that they've actually created a technology now where you can actually create uh, a human being from basically two. I wish I understood the science better, but typically my understanding is you need a man and a woman in order to
Hmm.
make a baby, right? But they're actually able to do it with the cells of just one man from the cells of a. I'm not sure if I'm using the right terminology here, but basically you can create a baby, a fetus with just the DNA from a man or multiple men, and that's crazy stuff. And now we're on the verge of splicing humans with other beings and so forth. And my understanding is that this stuff was done in the past and actually led to a whole bunch of abominations. I mean, there's a reason why you
I was
read
gonna
these
say it
stories of
almost sounds like cloning because if you're using one man to recreate it, it's going to be 100% the same DNA.
I wish I understood the science, but this is like 100% of science. Bearing in mind, they actually found this to be not reproducible like 100%. So,
Mm.
and there was a test where they did this and they found it was actually the life form was actually failing. So it hasn't passed the ethical guidelines or anything like that. But the fact that it can be done now is troubling in of itself. And
Mm.
if this is what you're hearing about within the mainstream, you can only wonder what's being done outside of that. Like we're unequivocally at the point where, in my opinion, we're actually doing this stuff. There are people that are doing this stuff now. They're actually splicing DNA, and this is the kind of technology that worries me. The kind of stuff that we are actually doing right now. For instance, with CRISPR technology, I mean, this stuff
Mhm.
is like 6, 7, 8 years old, but we're at the point where we're manipulating the building blocks of creation on the DNA level at the point where we can, I mean, granted, you can use this stuff for good stuff, you can get rid of diseases, Down syndrome, all this kind of stuff, but you can effectively create beings that weren't supposed to be here. And when I say weren't supposed to be here, haven't come about in any kind of natural fashion where they've had time to adapt to the flora and fauna of the planet, right? It's like you've just thrown something into an environment that is not supposed to naturally be there. And my understanding of an environment is that it takes time to acclimate. In the same way that when the Spanish conquistadors, they just arrived in these lands, right, where these foreign lands, right, the Americas, because the people weren't familiar with that breed of people, people were dropping dead within days, right, because
Mhm.
of the viruses that these people had,
The
right?
white man disease.
Yeah, the white man disease. And anytime you're adding in, I guess this is my analogy to throwing something that has an artificial construction into an environment that is not familiar with it, it creates potential problems. And I think
Mm.
there are definitely, I mean, anything to do with adding a different species into a different ecosystem, that causes a whole bunch of problems. And
That's
that's,
really what the technology, that's really what technology is as a concept. Really, I mean, you go back astrologically, we think of,
mhm,
Capricorn energy and Saturn,
yeah,
perfected systems with rules and no change. And then what happens? Aquarius comes in and completely changes, like the planet Uranus that rules Aquarius comes in and changes everything. When we discovered Uranus in 1781 with the telescope, all of the astrological charts and models and the framework had to be completely overhauled. And so that's why, when you mentioned before,
that's
like,
interesting.
where
Yeah.
is this technology coming from? Anything from fire to agriculture to the conveyor belt to AI and the internet. Where is it coming from? And are we actually applying Saturn in a way that works with us as well? Because the conscious entities behind the technology itself, I want to create distinction between that. The technology itself is a tool. We
Okay.
can assert our own sovereignty, our own will, and use it in a way for our own benefits. But look at a lot of young kids, for example, using social media. Are they using it? Are they even capable of using it in a way that's good for them? Well, no, many will learn the hard way and then try and pass on that wisdom to the next generation if technology hasn't outpaced the ability for the next generation to actually learn from that because the world's going so fast. But it's understanding, it's like, right, if we're going to be taking on new technology, there has to be some level of caution that a lot of people are just not applying. Just look at COVID and just look at the way these provisionally approved mRNA injections that they called vaccines. I don't want to get into whether they're safe or not. They were only provisionally approved, and then not through law, but through that in Victoria, it was the Health and Wellbeing Act. And Brett Sutton was basically a non-elected official, was able to decree that it was mandatory. Now the courts rule on sentences that are mandatory.
Hmm.
Health and unelected officials don't get to use court terminology. Yet people went along with it because people were scared. They shut down their consciousness. They lost their free will, and they then basically became victim of whatever they were being told to do, whether they were harmed or not. It's the same with anything else as well. The AI is something that doesn't have to overpower us if we don't let it. Collectively, this
Hmm.
this electromagnetic radiation from this digital technology that we use has done a lot of good, as you mentioned, and I completely agree. But the thing is, you also look at people who doom scroll, people who use it for, unhealthy things. Look, like a lot of people have like I myself have been a gaming addict, and there's a lot of pornography addiction out there, and there's lots of ways that it's made so many things that aren't necessarily productive. They're not healthy. It's made it so much easier to divulge in these bad behaviors as well. And that's the double-edged sword as well. And that's where, again, simplify it. Are the people mature enough and capable to know how to implement this in a healthy manner? And this is where I would actually go against the libertarian mindset and go, well, we do need rules to the extent that people aren't able to manage and police and regulate even themselves.
Hmm.
Out of love, of course, not out of control and domination.
Yeah, bro, you touch on such powerful themes, at least for me here, and I think
Hmm.
for most people, because this is the real question here, and it's something I struggle with because you always hear me talk about freedom and the human spirit and the efflorescence of consciousness and so forth, but what comes with that is the potential for also harms, and if you look at this as a parent, as a guardian, you don't want to give matches to kids, right? It's like
Of course.
we are kids that have found the matches, so to speak. And we're at this point in history, and it's the most incredible point in history we've ever been in. Uh, maybe. Anyway,
To
I
what
have
we
a,
know.
to what we know, I have a feeling that this is not the first time we've been here, right?
Hmm.
But we have such incredible power at our disposal, and our technological advancement, I would argue, is far beyond our collective spiritual conscious awareness, our ability to actually use this kind of stuff. In the same way, it's probably not a good idea to give a loaded gun to an 8-year-old kid. Oh, maybe if it was brought up in like an environment where like you were teaching from a young age, but we're not in that environment. We're in an environment here where most of us have these mental illnesses. They're on Prozac and Adderall, and we probably have the maturity of like 4 or 5 year olds, and then we're being given these weapons, these powerful weapons, nuclear weapons, collectively, and artificial intelligence, which is kind of like it's funny when you this is me going on a little a digression like tangentially speaking here. Look, but
Hmm.
this is related. We see how technology is becoming more powerful, but we've gone from the realm of nuclear weapons, bigger, hydrogen and so forth, to the realm of the the
The
microscopic yeah.
nanotechnology.
And I have
Yeah.
this theory because we're in the age of the Aquarius air sign, right? It's like we're moving into this realm of information and power actually being more on this air micro level. And the kind of technology that we are really seeing being potentially dangerous now is not so much the big weapons like the nuclear weapons, and don't get me wrong, that's dangerous enough, but it's the AI, it's the genetic weapons, it's CRISPR technology. I mean, this is like nuclear weapons 2.0, and it's more dangerous than I think any nuclear weapon that we've seen in the past. And the fact that this technology is now at the disposal of your average person, it is a concern. But that being said, the problem, right, I find is that whereas much of these ideas often start off as a way of actually benefiting society, you can say this about cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, right? Like initially the idea was to have a decentralized system where we're not having these central banks controlling the money supply and all that kind of stuff. Or you can make the same argument in regards to much of technology, but it gets in the wrong hands. It's often used because you mentioned the point there that there's the tool, the idea of using this thing as a way of either benefiting your life, you can use it to do good or bad. But then there's also the element of there being a consciousness within this thing, which is another component that we often don't speak about. Because on a classic libertarian level, right, like on a freedom mentality, I would say, hey, look, man, look, we can't not allow people to have freedom of speech, have words. We can't not allow people to have these technologies because they're potentially bad. Anything can be used to harm others, whether it is a spoken word, you could lie, or whether it is a gun or technology that can be used to commit evil things, right? But when we're dealing with the realm of consciousness here, the fact that there is actually an argument to be made that when you're dealing with much of these technologies like AI, there's this concept known as the egregore in the
Mm.
ancient mystery schools. It's kind of like this when you see a collective actually come together. I look at AI as being a manifestation of the collective intelligence of the earth, so to speak, all our information coming together. It's obviously more complicated than that. It's been trained, it's been modeled on data, but then there's also a component that, in my understanding, seems to map out like the neural pathways or something like that, and it's able to form like the basic idea is that this thing has essentially taken a consciousness that has been created through this group, and as a result, that thing has a spark of awareness within it. And perhaps it's not in the classical understanding of sentience, awareness, and what we attribute to any sentient being, but there definitely is an inherent intelligence embedded within this technology. And that in of itself gives it the like a different consideration. It's not just a tool there. It is actually a live thing that has the potential to do a lot of negativity, but I think it needs to also perhaps be looked at in a different light. And I'm kind of just speaking off the cuff here. As I'm even saying this, I'm kind of formulating my own ideas in my head. I don't know how I feel
Like,
about it, but I do
yeah.
agree that it definitely changes things. But the real question is whether or not we move into a society where we lean into that urge to restrict the human, awareness, because every technology comes with problems. I think the bigger problem is the fact that there are bad actors out there that want to use it in order to do bad things.
Can
And
I clarify though that
absolutely,
like you
go on.
mentioned you mentioned like suppression of ourselves and suppression
Hmm.
of our access to things like technology, whether it be a gun or a knife or AI or something like, or
Hmm.
even social media, is
Sure.
different from our inalienable rights. It's like I love hearing you say this because it's one I've aligned with. There's only three things you can hide for so long: the sun, the moon, and the truth.
Yeah, yeah, I often
And
say that.
that's
Yeah.
one I've always loved that line.
Hmm.
And the thing is, essentially, the right to speak your mind and be yourself. Really, you can only suppress that for so long because that's who you are and what you are in essence. Things like access to things outside of yourself. It's sort of hard to say whether they should be free and unregulated or anything like that as well. I very much fell hard into the libertarian category as well until I realized the limitations of it as well. And it's really only to the extent that people should be free to make their own choices, to the extent that number one, they have the capacity, and number two, they have the maturity to do it properly. Because that's where intention really comes into it. And people, bad actors, simply have the capacity with malicious intention.
Salient point. Who gets to decide, though? Who has the maturity, the awareness to do that? It's so easy for a government to say, "Hey, look, you're a little ungrounded in the fact that you're speaking about all these metaphysical things. Perhaps you belong in a
Mm,
in a psych ward." 'Cause there were police officers around the time of the whole COVID thing, right? Using that argument, right? When people were saying conspiracies in regards to the
mm,
efficacy of this magic potion that, that sounds like a conspiracy theory. Look, you look like you need help. I remember watching a particular video and this being a common thing that was pushed. You don't seem like you're all in it. Perhaps you need to get your head checked. This is a common argument people will use uh, to to essentially disarm people's ability to make informed decisions when a lot of the time, like for instance, in regards to the topic of, the I call them magic potions and whatnot, I was
mm.
extremely informed. I mean, I'd have conversations with doctors all the time, and there was not maybe other than the one conversation just when everything popped off, every conversation that I had with a doctor, like they were left realizing that they basically knew nothing about this technology and they had no awareness about the effects that this potentially had. And more often than not, they were in agreement with me, but they just felt like I felt like they couldn't openly say it. But that being said, I would be the one that would be the informed person that's actually going out and done the research, right? Because he has a viewpoint that is not in line with the status quo, would be considered the one that perhaps needs to be safeguarded. And it's very, I guess the argument I'm trying to make here is that it's very easy to fall into the realm of policing people because you don't think they have the adequate tools to make decisions, and that's the treacherous nature of
Mm.
control. You
Well,
always make
that's
yeah.
I don't
Mm,
necessarily subscribe to, like when it comes to things like regulation, I'm not talking to centralized government as we have today as a form of regulation.
sure.
Even social groups or, say even with Eleanor and I, like in the way
Yeah.
we sort of regulate the relationship as well. Like if she's not happy, I'm not going to sit there trying to make jokes even if it makes her worse. Like I'll regulate myself and then I'll try and regulate her. We run away with these concepts because they become so large scale that we actually forget the underlying principle of it as well. And even something like police and policing. Well,
Hmm.
the problem with something like the concept of police is that we've given away our own authority to say these people or this branch, this institution has the right to conduct policing of certain policies on behalf of everyone else. And no
Hmm.
one else has the right to know what's happening for things like privacy reasons or national security or there's all these extra constructs laid into it as well. But if we are to be sovereign, it means we need to take responsibility for all of these parts and recognize that everyone needs to hold everyone else to account. And everyone else needs to hold everyone else free to express themselves to the extent as well. It's both at the same time. And it's if you can't understand what sovereignty is in principle, then you will get lost in the paradox of do we need more regulation or less without understanding that we're here to grow and learn how to live both within larger frameworks of freedom while it's sort of different layers of limitation also continue to hold at the same time.
We're on the same page. I completely agree. In terms of regulating socially, in terms of, I mean, there are so many ways of of restricting certain things that, let's say, you collectively think are bad, right? Without the use of force, without the use of actual direct violence.
Mhm.
Like for instance, you can,
Or force and violence being two different things
yeah,
if you've
yeah,
listened to Mas Passio's work.
absolutely. Like it always comes down to definitions, and I'm actually very familiar with the way in which he defines violence, as violation and so forth. But I think euphemistically, when people are referring to violence, they're more referring to the idea of actual physical violence, like
Mm.
actual force. Yeah, but look, the point I was going to make here is that as a parent, I'm not a parent. I mean, I kind of consider myself a guardian to my next door neighbor's Labrador, but not the same thing. But yeah, obviously it's incumbent upon you to you take on the responsibility of protecting certain things that you are responsible for because you know yourself to be more aware and so forth, right? That being said, granted, you're not only motivated by actually doing it for their benefit, um, I think this is my way of understanding this, that if that being that you were taking care of was to exercise enough control, enough awareness to actually resist that, like was, for instance, if a dog was very, very adamant that it did not want me to take care of it, like was adamant, I am at some point, just like a parent, right? Because you can make the argument that a parent has the right to do whatever it deems fit to that child, and that becomes extremely problematic when that parent is doing things that are, I think, arguably not in the best interest of the child. And at a point, if the child reaches the point where they're actually conscious, aware enough to actually take ownership of their own authority, then they have the right to do that. You can't force your will on someone. That's how I express that within a physical, like tangible way. But I always succumb to this idea that ultimately you have to honor the free will of the sovereign being because the alternative, it just in my mind when I analytically look at this like a chess game, it leads to this realm where you can justify anything. You can always say, hey, look, I'm doing it in your best interest. I'm not allowing you to do X and Y. And unfortunately, not everyone has the right level of consciousness in order to preside over a being. Like we just think we do sometimes, and I see many situations, whether it's the relationship that a government has towards its people, or whether a parent, the relationship a parent has to, like there are many situations during the whole,
Mm.
COVID crisis and so forth, where I saw relationships within, I guess I can also speak from my own experience, right? But a lot of situations where the breakdown between the mother, father, or the son, daughter tore apart because, like, on one hand, the child, like a friend of mine, his daughter adamantly wanted to get the jab, right? And the father was completely against it. Mother was for it, all right? And it became this very tricky thing where, even though the father was completely against it, because the child wanted to do so, it became her choice. Like she believed that she knew what was best for her, even though I agree that that was not the best choice. It was actually an extremely risky thing to do. At some point, like I think she was maybe 16 or 17 or something like that. Um, it my attitude would be that it really came down to her choice. Like she should be informed. I mean, this is the whole idea of informed consent, right? Like you reach a point where, yeah, all you can really do is inform people of the options. The problem is that people weren't really given informed consent. They were told this obfuscated nonsense, and as a result, they weren't really making decisions. But on some level, I think people have to, if they exercise it, they have to take you at least have to allow them to take accountability for themselves. And it's the hardest thing to do. And in practice, I probably wouldn't be able to do that if I really cared about like
Mm.
my daughter or someone like that. But in principle, that's the mentality that I have. Like I'm a practical person in the sense that I don't think I'd be able to do it in all situations, but I do believe that is the approach that you should aim for. They're my thoughts
Well,
anyway.
it's what do you uphold as your highest value?
Freedom,
Ultimately,
choice, freedom.
like
Okay.
this is the challenge because everyone has to
Mm,
pick something. Like what before when you
mm,
mentioned like atheism, and they only really believe that this material world is it.
yeah.
Really, what everyone is, everyone has to put something as their highest value. And
Hmm.
really, that's sort of the challenge of, is love your highest value? And love and freedom, in truth, go hand in hand. Do you love someone enough to respect their right to be free?
That is beautiful. That is beautiful, bro. That is actually a salient way of expressing that, because Yeah, it kind of goes hand in hand. Like you may love someone to death, right? But if you're not willing to respect their ability to make choices for themselves,
Mm.
you're coming out of ego. Like I know a lot of people have this mentality where they say they love someone. I love them so much, I can't stand you being with anyone else. Even if being with me is destroying you because I need to be with you. But if you truly love them in this sense of agape, right? Like universal
Hmm.
love, not like this possessive
Well,
kind
that's
of love.
love for the divine, love for all of creation.
Yes, yes, absolutely. But it's hard to do. But I try to, that's the benchmark, like to try to develop this attitude where I'm like, look, I don't want to see you leave me because I'm attached to you, right? I'm a human being, I still have these attachments. But if I'm working from the highest version of myself, then I have to want what I believe is in your, or respect your ability to make that decision for yourself and hope that you'll make the right one, but I still can't force it. And that's the highest form of love, I think.
Yeah, well, this is something that like we've learned, especially through Dolores Cannon's work, even before we started exploring past life hypnosis and such as well as understanding, as she calls it, the Earth School, and
Hmm.
how we're eternal spirits, and we come down to the Earth School to learn different things and to grow our consciousness and to expand into greater states of love ultimately. And it's something that a lot of, younger souls and more damaged souls, they're the ones who will make these, these cardinal mistakes, the cardinal sins, really. These ones, such as from the other side, like murder is unfathomable of your fellow man. Like it's just something that they can't even begin to grasp because the level of love there and the level of connection and oneness that they feel relative to the human is so close that to harm someone else or even to harm yourself. I've had an issue for a large part of my life where I was nail biting, and that come to a lot of that was a form of that was done out of self-harm to get attention for, lack of emotional processing.
Well, nail
And
biting, like just biting.
nail biting,
Oh,
biting
this
my
is something.
nails till they'd
Oh,
bleed.
isn't that something you do when you're just nervous? Like, well, is there some kind of underlying rationale
Well,
behind that?
it's sort of like a stem as well. But like even before like autistic stems and such as well. But it was yeah, it was a way to release stress. But it is in my case, as I was told directly by my higher self, as I channeled as my higher self. It's weird to explain these sort of trance states,
Hmm.
but it was done out of a sense of self-harm, and this was a very important clue for me to actually figure out my own life purpose, my own set of contracts to overcome, and to actually help me in the direction that I wanted to go in this life as well. So even understanding when it comes to things like in this case, self-harm,
Hmm.
it's not even one that it's necessarily just against another human or against sentient life. Ultimately, it's a reflection of what we're doing to ourselves. And that there is something that was a big clue because that was actually an outward expression where I was basically asking the world for help because everyone can see your hands. And if they can see nails that are damaged, then they can see that there's something that you are, visibly seeking assistance with. And
Powerful.
that goes back to, yeah, and it goes to really the level of spiritual disconnection that I had by that age and felt like no one could actually hear my soul crying out for help. And no one did. And I learned about that in the regression. But there's so many clues that we actually carry through the types of relationships we have with others, or even the behaviors, the distorted behaviors that we act upon ourselves and inflict upon ourselves as well, to show us something deeper that we're trying to connect with as well.
That's that's powerful and very relatable. I uh I need to get into I'm actually not familiar with Dolores Cannon. Is that what you
Dolores
mentioned?
Cannon, yeah.
Yeah, but when you were talking about her work, it reminded me of Helena Blavatsky's work in the
Mm,
sense that she would speak about her perspective was along the lines of this plane being a school, and obviously using this as a way of matriculating to higher levels of awareness and so forth. And that is a common theme, I think, within the Eastern tradition. But I particularly remember that being a strong theme within her work. And
mm.
Dolores Cannon, she's someone that like you obviously uh, started following in terms of her
Yeah, she's
school.
she's quite big. She's quite influential on the new age movement, but bringing her own very specific field. She's not like she speaks to UFOs and
Sure.
and even, I mean, you might call them, like as Helena Blavatsky calls them, root races. She
Yeah.
talks about ancient civilizations as well. And there is a lot of similarity because they both subscribe to that underlying wisdom. And there's another level and that we can connect to, something that transcends all of this as well.
Hmm.
And, like as Blavatsky said in Theosophy, there's no religion higher than truth.
Yeah, I often say that that's one of my friends. There's the connection there. Like when you were speaking about her, I didn't actually know that she was when you mentioned New Age movement, I know the whole history of that. Like that can be tied to the in the same way that the first movers of Bitcoin, right? They were like these
Mm.
libertarian kind of gangsters that wanted to free themselves from, central banks and so forth. The first movers of the New Age, like New Thought movement, were these figures like Helena Blavatsky and C.W. Leadbeater. And
Yes.
I mean, in terms of forming theosophy, and which I presumed is it something that's influenced what was her name again? Elite
Dolores Cannon?
Dolores. Yeah.
No,
No,
there's
it's
there's
very
really
different.
no. She was just a standard hypnotist,
Okay.
um, helping someone in the U.S. military where because she was stationed in Texas with her husband, who was a military man, helping a woman in the military lose weight, and she took her a little bit too deep accidentally, and she stumbled back into a very vivid exploration of I think it was like 1930s New York. And then she ended up writing, like doing it again and like published what was her first book that she wrote, like 30 years into her journey. So a lot of her own works, her own understanding of the world, metaphysically speaking, was just done through, as she calls herself, the reporter of secret knowledge.
Yeah, that's the same theme I think you find within a lot of these teachers. They just
Yep.
essentially tapped into this knowledge, which is essentially accessible to us all when we're in that state. I know this is the theme that you find within Edgar Casey, the Sleeping Prophet,
Yes.
and it's a common theme. Like this, I think a lot of people get caught up on different figures, different religions, and so forth, but there is an underlying truth to this, and this is one of the things I loved about Helena Blavatsky's phrase. There is no religion higher than truth, because at the end of the
Mm.
day, the truth is what it is, and whereas we as humans, as beings, we tend to interpret that sometimes differently through our own lens, but that core aspect of what it is what it is, and yeah, enough said.
Yeah,
But
with the
yeah.
people as well. Like this goes back to like you can see the Empress behind us. She's a spirit working, the archetype working to, give Eleanor and I a rich, abundant life as well. Like you look at Venus, you look at the card. This is from the tarot deck, the modern way. And so you see
Okay.
her out unlike the Emperor who sits on a throne in a castle, the Empress sits out in a big open field with the heart with Venus inside and the rod of command, but she commands nature, and she's actually pregnant too because she's giving birth. But what you're talking with these figures, it's understanding the role that they actually play in the grander narrative. And so this is where I'd speak to like the Hierophant. Understanding knowledge, understanding what others have already figured out plays a crucial role in being able to drive this deeper. But learning how to work in order, for example, the Fool's Journey through the major arcana of the tarot. You versed in the tarot at
Peripherally,
all?
like I've
Okay.
through many of the figures that I've researched, like I've touched on it, but not to the point where I understand, the well, definitely not as well as you do when which you speak about these terms, nor have I actually wanted to touch on this, just in terms of, because whereas I'm definitely a proponent of it, like in terms of its efficacy when it's done correctly, divination, all that kind of stuff. I like the idea of my will, my consciousness, being such that it's not going to be subverted by anything that may come for me. In the sense that, like, I almost don't want to know what my future has to say about me, so that if it's negative, it's not going to. I want to have this idea within my mind that I can overcome any kind of negative attitude. Oh, sorry, not negative attitude, negative thing that is in store for me. And whereas I understand it's not something that um, I actually heard Bruce Lipton speak about the concept of astrology in the sense that whereas it is some like there are certain forces that are obviously playing on in your life in terms of affecting you, the future and so forth, but it's not set in stone in the sense that most people overlook the idea of consciousness when they speak about astrology, in that the more conscious you are, the more you have the ability to influence the forces that are at play. So whereas these forces are acting on us, because consciousness is also something that is an aspect of the future and so forth, when you become aware of this and when you are actually consciously acting on your destiny and so forth, you have the ability to influence this. And I think the more strong you become within your consciousness, within who you are, the more you have the ability to influence your destiny. And I guess my attitude on it is that whereas I actually do like to know, obviously, what's in store for me and so forth, like I don't want to become too reliant on the idea of looking for meaning in everything. I'd rather take on the attitude of shaping my destiny by actually asserting my will, if that makes
Mm.
sense. And that being said, I
But
am.
how do you structure that?
How do you structure that?
Like when it comes to the more metaphysical elements,
Hmm.
archetypes and spirits, they work in symbols. They work in stories and they work in these very, it's like taking a photo of something. You only get a snapshot of what it looks like at that moment. But if you say you took snapshots of yourself as, a child, as a man now, and as an old man, you would understand the spirit that weaves between all of those photos, but is present in just not any one of them. And that's really how things like these archetypes and how Eleanor and I relate to, and even we've even channeled different archetypes of the tarot as well to help give us guidance. We bring them in under sacred space. We've cleansed ourselves energetically, and knowing actually what that archetype, you connect to what it is in its essence, and the closer you get to it, the more you actually forget about the material dimension of reality, because language doesn't apply in the same way. Experience and the ontology of your being and their being, it doesn't exist it's like taking a picture of something. It doesn't tell you or show you what it is. And so that's why, altered states are key. But to the extent that you actually awaken and understand that part of yourself, you too can awaken to your own sovereignty at that level as well and become a master in that as well. So you have greater influence on the subtle energies as well that continue to play through the material world, but are not of the material world, just as we are.
That's powerful. And look, I definitely resonate with the idea of using these tools, using astrology in terms of being aware of your what is in store for you. And I think there's a lot to be gained from doing that kind of stuff. And it's something I'm actually very much into it in terms of the numerology. I mean, just to give you an idea, my dad was so into it that my very name, Krishna, was actually
Mm,
created because it had good numerology. And I also what I've learned is that when you are doing divination, in order to get a stronger, more accurate reading, like it classically, from what I understand, this is following the works of Michael Desarian, like they're done rather than being done separately, they're done in conjunction with each other. Like you'd often see numerology done with astrology, done with tarot, in order to get a stronger reading. And
mm.
these are things that, and like as much as you try, like as much as I say that, I like to allow my will to control my destiny and so forth. I'm of course an influence, but I see symbolism everywhere. And anytime I read into the tarot and so forth to see how relevant it is to my life, I'm always finding that is to be the case.
Mm.
And one of the benefits I find is that if you can see what's in store and you have an understanding of how it's affecting your psyche, you can better deal with it. And also let's say if there is some kind of like a problem that is in store in your future, or you're not seeing it clearly enough, by getting an understanding of that by actually using the tarot, and you can avert that through your conscious will, as opposed to not being consciously aware of it and allowing that problem to manifest. So I guess the
Well,
only
we're
point,
multidimensional beings, so to
absolutely,
the extent that we're conscious of that is to the extent that we actually have power in that space. That's why a lot of demons people are very scared of. Why? Because they have no level of understanding of their own ability to actually tell them to piss off. Just energetically, like get out of my field. Like you have no permission to be here. If there's any contracts, I renounce all of them. Now go. People don't know how to sort at that will within themselves.
mm,
Most people fight these demons, like they continue to struggle with them. They struggle with addiction, with anger issues, with unhealthy dynamics and such. But I would argue that, really coming to that left brain, right brain harmony is the
Hmm.
ability, like such as doing these readings. Half of it is using your left brain, understanding, mapping out, understanding the numbers, being able to create the synthesis, while the right half of the brain is still able to channel and connect to the underlying consciousness of the archetype that is coming through that reading as well. So it's
Yeah.
half science, half, it's like
Ma-
intuition
yeah,
almost.
it's
And that's
magic.
what
Yeah.
Aleister Crowley actually called magic
Yeah,
with a K.
that's
The
what was
ability to, the art and science to create change in accordance with the will, the true will.
That's what was coming to mind as you were saying that, magic. Like my mind was drifting to the idea of it because the component that I was trying to get across, right, in all my random outerings was that I value the idea of will so much. Like the idea, and it's actually an element in magic. A lot of people don't think. Like I think of the term abracadabra, right? I
Mm.
create through my word or something like that, the Aramaic, and the underlying theme is that within the word, that's an extension of your will. It's all coming from this idea that you're actually willing reality into existence. Now, it's not as simple as that. There are things that are working within you, like working around you. I don't believe that your will can overcome anything, but it's such a powerful component that simply using that, I think, or having favor in that is enough to circumvent so many of the adversities that people face in life. And one of the biggest issues I have with so many people within the New Age spiritual movement, what you will, is that they don't believe in the idea of actual free will. Like a lot of them are subscribed to this idea that they're actors that have no ability to control anything that's going on around them. At least I find, call that the the the, the hippie tradition. But I find a lot of people in this world they succumb to this idea that everything is as it is and they have no ability to really change it. And I am someone that resonates with the idea that yes, there are actual axiomatic principles inherent within this universe. There are things that are happening around us that influence us, but absolutely you have the ability through your will, by even just believing in something, that's enough to whether or not that is even true. I mean, we all know about the placebo, right? And the
Well,
different
when
terms.
there's a will, there's a way, if you also know
Yeah,
that saying too.
absolutely. And I wanted to mention this is a little kind of light, but my favorite comic hero is can you guess who that in the Marvel universe? Like, can you think of who that is? I'm not sure if
Uh,
you're that familiar
my
with
pop
Marvel.
culture is a little bit sort of
Okay,
lagging.
okay. Well, let me just say that I love the idea of the Green Lantern. When I discovered, I fell in love with it, the actual movie, because it's so metaphysical in nature. Most of these Marvel movies are. If you actually watch them with learned eyes, you realize there's actually a lot of esoteric concepts within them. That what's his name? Stan Lee. That guy
I'll have
was.
to go watch it,
Yeah,
but
he's a.
I would have
But
guessed. I don't know if it's Marvel, but Doctor Strange.
Oh, of course. That
Yeah.
actually became my favorite character after I watched the movie. But
Okay.
I will
Yeah.
state the whole idea of the Green Lantern is that the will is he's basically driven by his willpower, and it's the most
Mm.
powerful force in the universe. It's the underlying essence of everything. And interestingly enough, I mean, people say that courage is the testing point of every virtue. This is what C.S. Lewis would say, and the underlying essence of courage is willpower, right? And in order to do, and it's just such a powerfully inspiring thing to me that anything that wants to take that away and say that, look, you don't have that power within yourself is something that I try to steer away from because it's so important to develop that within yourself, this idea that you have the power within you. And I think one of the most enriching things about religion is that it embodies within people this belief that they have the Spirit of God, Krishna, Buddha, Allah, whatever it might be, working through them. And because they're tapped into this thing, it can help them overcome any challenge. And I think
Mm.
simply just believing that is powerful enough in order to affect their reality. And this is a basis of so much of what we see in the realm of placebo, so much of science, like people simply just believing something to be true. And that's why I feel so strongly about this concept, even though, as I'm sure you're aware, I completely value these tools in navigating the consciousness and navigating your life and so forth,
Yeah.
divination and so forth. But it's just something that I really am inspired by because so many people in this world don't believe in even the concept of free will. They believe that we live in a deterministic universe.
Mm.
And whereas there is an element of truth to that, I also believe that the very nature of creation is that there is consciousness, there is will. And within that means that we have the ability to overcome many of the obstacles that we face around us.
Of course, like it depends on the model that you use. I mean, what you're
Mm.
saying, like willpower and courage, you look at the chakra system, it all goes back to the solar plexus. Yeah, and then that's not even that's part of a larger model. So you can actually apply not only willpower comes through the solar plexus, but there's other parts of your dimensionality that you have to be aware of as well. Or if you consider astrology, Mars, the internal drive and energy you carry, and then Aries, the energy of actually exerting your own independence as well. So a lot of willpower comes through Mars and Aries energy as well. And knowing where they come through in each of these models is the more you subscribe to the model, the more you inherently begin to connect to these universal principles that exist in and through us. And then you don't have to just believe in willpower on its own. You actually have a complete language or framework now for that. In the tarot, this comes through in the magician, primarily, because it's about picking up the four tools, the four suits, the wands, the cups, the swords, and the pentacles, and being able to know how to use these four dimensions of reality, in a metaphysical sense, to your own will.
Can you just recap on those four things just
Mhm.
for a second again? You mentioned the four tools the magician uses. I found that really
Yes.
interesting. What are they?
Yeah, so these are the four suits of the actual tarot. So you have the major arcana, which starts with the Fool and ends with the World. They all have named cards, like the Empress here. And
Hmm.
then you've got the four major suits, the Wands, the Cups, the Swords, and the Pentacles. And these represent fire, water, air, and earth, all controlled by the major arcana of spirit, the fifth element.
That's
You see
interesting.
where this is going?
Uh,
So,
kind of like I have this one of my most uh like noted books that I often reference is called Warrior King Magician Lover, and it
yes.
represents like the four archetypes. And I'm
Remember Elliot
wondering,
Hulse talking about it all the time.
yeah, I'm a big fan of
Yep.
his stuff, but I was wondering if it relates to that because I see the sword representing the warrior that drive to overcome obstacle, and yeah, I'm not sure what the other objects meant, but I always find that that's a very powerful dynamic, at least in the masculine role. Like I find this theme I find within so much of like the journey in life. Like I've like this it's represented within these four
Mm.
archetypes, like the idea of the warrior, the idea of the king. And I always resonate with I tend to be the lover, right? That's the archetype of like wanting to have fun, wanting to enjoy yourself and so forth. But I find on some level that you definitely, at least I find you're definitely changing and you're leaning towards one. Like you start off as a kid wanting to kind of overcome obstacles and so forth, and you're this warrior. You want to stand for something you believe in, and then I tend to also lean towards the creative side of thing. That's the magician, right? The idea of manifesting reality through your mind, through the concept of like thinking and so forth. And then the last archetype is the most difficult. That's the king, because the idea is you have to have all of these different these are the other three archetypes in perfect balance in order to rule over your consciousness, and it's the most difficult thing to do. Like heavy wears the crown, like
Yeah.
because you're essentially in the realm of like management of all the different psyches. But
Yeah.
I just
I'm
felt
aware,
this.
I'm aware, I'm aware of the book. I haven't read
Oh,
it, but
you are.
I've
Oh,
I've
okay,
listened
yeah,
to it enough. So I'm versed in it, and I've actually
yeah,
spent a
that's
bit
so
of time
cool.
thinking about it as well. And I
Hmm.
use a different model for this one. I come back to you think in Christianity, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit.
Sure,
It's the mind, it's the heart, the emotions, and it's the body, essentially. These
that's
three.
three. Yeah,
And so I think of the mind being the magician, the thinker, the
absolutely.
understanding, the heart, the feminine being the lover. It's feeling, it's passion. And then the warrior being of body, he doesn't think, he doesn't feel, he just acts, he just does. And then who is the king? It's the spirit that comes in to rule over all three of these dimensions at the same time. And if he's not corrupt, he'll do it in harmony to make sure that they can express in the highest form.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I was thinking the Trinity. Where does the fourth come into play? But
Mm.
that's yeah, that's there are so many different systems that I think ultimately express this concept.
Yeah. But
Like you
but
meant,
being
yeah.
able to synthesize them across systems is how we develop this meta level understanding to the point that we can deconstruct that system now. We understand its place, we know how to use it, but we don't have to sit there with it. We don't have to let this be the pinnacle of everything we know. Because ultimately, and this is where my experience with spirituality is ultimately led to, is a
Mhm.
direct connection with infinite reality itself, which transcends any capacity for you to hold anything, any sense of identity, any understanding of what's real and what's not real. And I couldn't hold it for long, but really it to get lost in that ultimately is I want to say it was a taste of what the God consciousness is.
Powerful. So the God consciousness,
Mm.
what would you say is your close, like have you had, so you mentioned that experience is the closest that you've gotten to the God consciousness. Can you think of any other experiences that you've had where you felt like you tapped into that state? Because it's a common thing that I find
Not to
now.
that level,
Not to
no.
that level.
It was
Yeah.
it was one and done, and I just I don't think I'll experience something that powerful again in this incarnation. But it showed me.
Mm,
I saw it. I became it. It's very hard to describe. It was like being blissed out in a state of samadhi. Like it was just a full enlightenment moment. And
yeah.
when you realize that reality is ultimately infinite, that's the only thing it can be. You can understand that your consciousness is infinite as well, and that everything itself already is a construction. And that makes you both free and limited at the same time. And that's the paradox of existence. That's why no one will ever be able to solve out what reality ultimately is without actually realizing that you probably heard it, like you're God. And I remember my shaman said, you're God in drag. You just don't know it.
Yeah.
And a lot
Yeah.
of people like they have this very most people are a very religious mindset, or even if they're not religious, they hold a religion equivalent mindset of what they think God is and that it's separate from you. But that's only as imagined as you believe it to be. And so all models help you can they can either help you to get connect back to yourself and understand who and what you are, where you are, why it's happening again, so you can then build a better model and then get rid of the old one until you can recognize and transcend to a point that no model will ultimately suffice for what you are.
That's beautiful. I kind of I see this journey, as you are matriculating to higher levels of consciousness, your understanding of what you are is also growing. And
Hmm.
I also look at the evolution of humanity. I actually saw this beautiful science fiction movie that kind of illustrated this, right? And it's like it's this movie where uh, in short, you get to see a civilization develop in through different stages, and the tools that they use in order to express God like morphs like on a very rudimentary level. They're essentially to point like worshiping, like the elements and so forth, and then they kind of have they move into this phase where it becomes more kind of like your patriarchal religion, and then they move into the realm of science, and then they move into this understanding of universal consciousness. And it takes like 10,000 years or something like that. But the idea is on an evolutionary level, you have a look at man as we become more aware and conscious. This growth of our understanding of what God is also grows. And I kind of saw that in the way in which you were describing the experience there. And I think that's something that we're going through on an individual level and also on a
Hmm.
collective level. I mean,
Collective, yeah.
yeah, and as
And
much
even a
as
cosmic level. Like it's happening at
absolutely,
all the level. Again, that's another model. You
absolutely,
versus me is another level of construction, but you're describing something similar to spiral dynamics, collective psychological evolution. Are you aware of the model of spiral dynamics?
I am. I actually interviewed a practitioner of that some time ago, and it's funny you mentioned that because what was in my mind was spiral. Just as you
Yeah.
were talking about this, I'm not sure how connected, but I was now thinking about the evolution of mankind and how it's spiral-like in nature, and
Mm.
it's quite I mean, I don't believe coincidences, but it's quite appropriate that you mentioned spiral dynamics because it's. But I'll let you go into that because I'm actually curious how that relates to what we're talking about,
Mm.
spiral dynamics.
Well, I mean, something that I also love to put this on the back of is also something like Susan Cook Reuter's model of the 9 levels of increasing ego embrace as well, which speaks to the more individual element of how we go from a completely selfish baby who has no level of self-awareness other than just I have needs to the point that we can then begin to learn to play and socialize and then learn to achieve and then we can learn to like really collect resources and excel in our field, and then we can learn to give back, and then ultimately we learn to let go, which also tells the story of astrology as well. Capricorn right at the top in 10th house, learning how to achieve and become the best that you can. And then Aquarius, learning how to share it all and understand that you're not here alone to achieve. And then Pisces of just surrender your whole model of what you think everything is as well. And so Susan Cook Reuter's model, I think, it's similar to I think it's Levenger's model of ego development. as an individual expression of what spiral dynamics is doing collectively as well. So I love working with both of them in tandem. But essentially, it does the same thing. Collectively, we have to go through states where we're incredibly tribal, we're incredibly selfish, we're incredibly it's not even just for the sake of, the white man disease or the neighboring tribe. We can't go near them because, we might get infected with what they have gotten adapted to. But we learn to bridge that and then we move on through different stages and then the warring stages through red. And then we move on to, which is again, something like stage red is quite individualist. It's individualistic, us versus the other tribe. And then you move on to stage blue, which is really where some level of mysticism and religiosity comes in because it's more socially connected. I think of Ned Flanders as a very stage blue sort of guy where he's quite connected to the divine in his own right, but it's still done in a very sort of, there's a lacking logic to it. And then that's when we move, the pendulum swings back into the next stage of orange, which is it's very science, it is very empirical, and it understands that a lot of these religious beliefs, a lot of people actually just they create a shadow out of the blue stage. And then they become atheist without understanding that people like figures like Jordan Peterson are actually trying to bring back that blue stage into yellow, orange stage people's minds to go, you are built in layers, you're spiraling upwards, don't forget what's below you.
That's
There is something special to hold on to through religion. Otherwise, the thousands of years that people believed it, they didn't just do it because they had guns or knives to their head or throat. Like they understood something about this, and you are not so smart today that you think you can throw that all away. And so the next stage then goes on to stage green, which moves away from this empirical, individualistic orange stage into something that's again more collective, stage green, which is really it's more social justice. It's about balancing, bringing fairness to everyone as well, in understanding that. Again, it's more socialist policy, but the problem is a lot of people that are trying to push into stage green have created a shadow out of stage orange. So then they're wanting to share without understanding, well, it's the stage orange people that produce a lot of resources in today's society. Sage green want to bring in all the sharing of resources, but where's it all coming from? And then that's the end of tier one. And that's really still a very one-track mind stage, or tier of the spiral itself, because then you move into stage two or tier two, which goes into yellow. And yellow is the first level of its. And I'm a bit shaky on all of this because it's been a while since I've looked into it.
it's
But
absolutely brilliant.
yeah,
I'm
it's a
actually
level
taking
of
yeah.
self-awareness that transcends even yourself now. It's not even just about where I'm at and what I believe. I can see how others actually, they're at their own stages and how we can help them understand and bridge what they can't see in the other.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful map of the human experience. And like
Hmm.
I see that manifested in obviously astrology, in the zodiacs, in this system, the spiral system that you spoke of. And again, it made me think about how we have these ways of tracking different measurements of time, like our days, then our seasons and so forth. And whereas in the scientific world, we accept these things, right? Like these are models that were essentially came out of ancient Sumerian and so forth, six decimal system, 60
Hmm.
seconds in a minute, 16 minutes in an hour. They'd also mapped ways of tracking our consciousness, and these are the things that I think we're slowly learning now, like spiral dynamics and so forth. The Mayans were they apparently had the most sophisticated time system, and they map the evolutionary cycles that we go through. This is expressed within the bactons and how, and
Mm.
whereas I remember 2012, people thought that was the end of the world, right? That whole so to
Yep.
speak, but it's basically the end of the bacton. Like it's actually the idea is moving into a different sphere of awareness, so to speak. And listening to you map out the spiral, I could see how things are playing out in whether it's in the realm of politics, well, in the realm of technology, like, and it made me think about what I was saying initially about how there's so many problems in the world, but maybe what we're going through right now is what we are supposed to be going through. And when you first when we were first talking about this thing, and I was thinking about spiral in my mind, and you went into spiral dynamics, the interesting connection here is that I look at the evolution. Maybe this is connected of humanity, and whereas it seems as if we're just going around in circles on one dimensional level, right? Because on one hand, it's like you see history repeating itself. History's prologue. It's like, don't we learn from the mistakes of the past? Like we do this, like we do these stupid things like book burning, right? And
Yeah,
then
those
like,
who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think this is actually something I feel like I probably got this from Mark Passio, but this spiral-like nature where is we we go around, yes, we repeat, but each rotation we get a little better. There is an
Hmm.
upliftment, like we learn a bit more. I mean, granted, we repeated a lot of things, but look, we at least we're not feeding the Christians to the lions now. Now we're just
Yeah.
blocking their social media accounts, right? And and at least like there is definitely an argument to be made that there is a progression here. There is a
Mm,
spiral like this. When I think of a spiral, as you would imagine, it's going upwards. Yes, it's
mm,
repeating, but there is an inclination, there is an efflorescence of consciousness each
mm.
time. And that's what we're seeing in humanity.
Of
So it's
course, the
not
Buddhists understand that. That's how they
yeah.
developed the stupa.
The what?
The stupa, where they have sort of the temple in the center and they've got the spiral going around until you get closer and closer, and it represents your path to enlightenment as a singular point. It's a singular point that has no point because as we create a stupa in our own minds, really, it's like we've just constructed that point to begin with. Again, another model. Once you understand it, you can transcend it.
Oh, bro, that is seriously, man. This is powerful stuff. I'm only weird. I know I said 2 hours for this as a limit. I was thinking maybe it might go for one. I didn't want to push you, but we covered so much ground, and like I really do appreciate your time, man. I've enjoyed this conversation so much, and I would love to do this again. I
Of
I'm
course.
I think people are going to get a lot out of this. I can't wait to
Mm.
share this on the different platforms and so forth, and obviously plug you out there. Do you? But I want to kind of wind this thing down now.
Of course, yeah.
But do you have any? Obviously, you're on. There's the website you have, but if you have any
Mhm.
social media, if you can let people know how to get a hold of you, man, you have such a tremendous repertoire of knowledge, man, and I think people need to get a hold of it.
There's a lot more to get out. So our website is truthofyou.com.au and I'm the Daniel Darman on Instagram and I'm Daniel Darman on LinkedIn as well for any of the more professional people who'd listen to your show.
Fantastic. Daniel, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Crucial Journey. You are a scholar, you're a gentleman. I knew we were going to have some deep conversations. And honestly, this is been one of my favorite conversations, man. Like there's so many things we touched on and so much more to touch on, and
Hmm.
like this is precisely what I was wanting to do, just have a very organic conversation where we just chat like two lost souls coming together, man. And I really did enjoy this. You could probably see me getting kind of like caught up in these rants. That's what I do when I'm
It's not
very
a rant.
excited.
You're
But
just enjoying yourself.
yeah,
That's
but
what it's
I
all about.
absolutely, but I really did enjoy the exchange of information. You had some great knowledge. I'm sure people are going to get a lot out of. And bro, I'd love to have you back on again. We can dive even deeper into because we didn't even look. I literally had like a whole list of questions. I'm like, oh, I should probably study this, but I just didn't need to because it's a free flowing conversation. But I
Mm.
know you're interested in human design and. There's a lot of stuff that we could get into on this, and a lot of concept figures that have inspired you. But look, we'll pick this up another time. But for now, thank you so much, man. It's been an absolute pleasure having you for the last 2 hours delving into these topics. And as I always say, there are three things that cannot remain hidden for long: the sun, the moon, and the wisdomatic truth bombs of Daniel Darman. My brother, thank you so much.
And thank you for having me, Krishna.
My man. All right, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, kisses, hugs, and belly rubs. Be sure to tell your mom, tell your friends about this podcast, and hope you enjoy this one. Let Daniel know about your thoughts and any musings that you've had from this conversation. Likewise. Until next time, peace.
I don't even care. There is only